the faculty and the staff and the president and everyone here at Essex County College, we want you to be exposed to a multiplicity of experiences. And we want you to be familiar with the museums and the art locations around New York that you might visit and enhance and broaden your thinking, your appreciation of art. Art appreciation doesn't just happen because you read a book or you look at these digital videos. It happens because you get out and you see artistic things. So what I wanted to do is make sure that you have a familiarization of those art treasures in and around New York. That's what we call this. Museums and art treasures in and around New York. And the first one is one we visit every semester. Both campuses where I teach in West Essex, as well as the main campus, the Alma campus in Newark, we visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and we visit the Cathedral of the St. John Divine, an example of Gothic architecture. So when we go to the Met, we don't spend all day there, but we try to take advantage of the fact toward the end of the semester that we've studied Egyptian art, we've studied Greek art, we've studied Impressionism and non-objective painting. So therefore we can get a real understanding and a real appreciation for those works and artists, and to stand where artists stood thousands of years ago, and we stand in front of their works. So recently, there was a cafeteria at the Metropolitan where it was a sunken dining room, and someone gave millions of dollars to recreate a Greek atrium in the Metropolitan Museum, and what an atrium it is. You see, when you were invited to a Greek or Roman home back in those days, everything was centered around the atrium. And the apartments were around the walls, and then they would have a bell or they would have some kind of instrument that would call you to dinner, and everyone would come into the center in what we call the atrium. Now, the Metropolitan Museum of Art is a fantastic piece of architecture. Thousands of people visit each day, not just each week, but each day. They've added, in a very clever and creative way, several pavilions that have basically been made out of glass. They just extended the roofs, and as a result, we have these fantastic galleries. We have a gallery that has a dining room at the upper level, and then we can walk around and go to the old portion, and we see on the second level one of the works by Rodin. And here, this piece of sculpture is of such we can walk around it. There you see the arch that we talked about earlier. And so several classes to leave, and we go to Essex. It's Essex on the Move. And we go to see the upper portion here. That's work by Maillot. And down here we see Degas, which is on the second level. And then our students go into the Tomb of Dendur. That's a tomb that was taken from Egypt and given to the Metropolitan Museum about 2 weeks before he passed away. Was Anwar Sadat, president of Egypt at the time. And it was reconstructed in the museum in this big pavilion, which we will see. Notice how when you go to a museum, the sculpture sets out from the wall. That's because sculptors want you to walk around their works. So the painter gives you a length and width presentation with many colors, But the sculptor says, I can give you 360 different pictures right on the same level. All you'll do is walk 1 degree at a time around my sculpture, and you will get 360 different ways of looking at it. So sculpture tends to be out from the wall. But when you go to the Metropolitan, you see these giant paintings. I've seen this painting with Washington crossing the Delaware many times. But when you go there and you see it and its size, what a profound effect it has on you. So in the pavilion that they built with this pool, many people throw money into the pool, and so we can walk around this pavilion and we see these pieces. We know that these were created while the pharaoh was living because the hands sit on the laps of these pharaohs. And you get a picture of Egypt. If you go during the warmer months, many people outside, you see musicians, see bands outside, and people sitting on the steps of the Metropolitan. But what's really exciting are those sculpture galleries that you can go and appreciate these pieces of marble sculpture and to walk around them. Recently, the Metropolitan fixed up its fountains and has benches there where you can come now and sit out and enjoy the presence of artists from all over. But here's our atrium lit up. Notice in the center there, the whole activity is around the center. And the light comes in from above, and the rooms are in a surrounding way. So therefore, it becomes one house with many rooms facing an atrium. And in this atrium, we have Greek works that embody an appreciation of Plato's statement, the body is the temple of the soul, meaning if one's physique and body was kept up, then it will make for a healthy mind and a healthy life. And as we know, the Olympics emanated from the Greeks. So in this atrium, it's just fascinating. You can sit on a bench or you can walk around and know and realize that you're walking where artists stood 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, and created these works of art. We can go into different galleries and see medieval. We can go into other sculpture galleries, but here is our atrium again. And I just can't get over, even the floor has an accent like the Pantheon. So the next time you go to New York, as we did with the students, go to the Metropolitan, but go to the Greek atrium and then go down the hall where we see works. Even the main corridor of the Metropolitan is exciting. There are works. There's an Egyptian work right in front of us here. The bookstore is here, where you can buy gifts and books about art. And here is our tomb of Dendor, again, where students can walk in and out and be a part of Egypt thousands of years ago. So the Metropolitan is this giant institution on Fifth Avenue. And you can never see everything in 1, 2, or even 3 days. It takes time. You go into the Egyptian portion, you will see the size of many of these limestone and granite works. When you go to the gallery, the sculpture gallery, you will see how the glass between two buildings has framed and created a interior sculpture garden. In the painting galleries, and most of them are upstairs on the second floor, we will see these paintings, these originals. There's nothing copied here. It's all original. So this Metropolitan, with its Romanesque arch and its long hallways, gives us a power. When we go into the Egyptian pavilion, we see a setting that is just spectacular. They have dinners here, they have concerts here, and you can get in on that. Then they finished a gallery not too long ago. They call it the Romeo and Juliet balcony, but it's a sculpture garden. And when you walk in here and you, with that beige color all over this particular gallery, it's a mood change. And you become very excited when you come into this room because out in the hallway or in the main corridor, you have all these people, but you come in here and you have a peaceful uh, atmosphere. It's nothing like going upstairs and standing in front of a Van Gogh. Remember, you're standing where he stood. And each of his paintings, he only sold one painting his whole life. His brother sold it for him. But each of his works were worth millions. But they're treasures to see the brushstroke, to see the oil paint coming out from the canvas. Nothing like seeing an original. We go upstairs, we see Degas, we see Monet, we see all of the Impressionist works here in this great institution that houses thousands of works, thousands of pieces of sculpture, drawings, paintings, and costumes. So the Essex students have an exposure to things that we don't always see. And it is my pleasure each semester to take students and to show them Egyptian painting, to show them Greek works, to show them all the things that are happening in the art world. And they are there to see for themselves. We're not allowed to touch things, but we certainly are invited to look and to appreciate each piece of sculpture that we can walk around. We go to the Persian gallery, and we can put on a microphone or a headphone and listen to every part of this history of Persia. We can go to the costume gallery and see famous costumes worn by famous people or collector's items. We can go to the Metropolitan Museum store and buy all kinds of clothes and jewelry and books and souvenirs, ties, a gift shop so that you can, it's a little expensive, but you can buy some exciting things here that come from the museum. You see these pieces of sculpture that are just fantastic. Just appreciate life and the activity of the human body, the beauty of the human body. And remember, the artist considers the body the most beautiful form in the world. So we leave the Metropolitan for a moment and we go down to 75th Street and Madison Avenue. And that's where we will find the Whitney Museum of American Art. That means that most, if not all, of the work here was brought in and is accomplished and created by American artists. We see paintings. There's one by George Bellows, and this is a famous one at the Whitney, Dempsey and Firpo. It was a very famous painting, and we can go there and see the original. Another museum I recommend that you go and visit, the Museum of Modern Art. We call it MoMA. It's on 53rd Street, just off Fifth Avenue. And you can go and see these modern works. Go into the sculpture gallery, see abstract pieces of sculpture, see pieces that were cast in metal and in bronze. And you can see Henry Moore's work. And they have a restaurant in the garden. And you can enjoy yourself or with a friend and present artworks that are just fantastic. Shapes and sculpture and painting. Much of it is abstract or non-objective, and then there are a number of works that are designed for you to stand way back and look, or just sit and marvel at the creativity that you're looking at. Some paintings are meant to look from where we are. And I have even a glass when I'm painting and you can hold up. It's the opposite of a magnifying glass. When you hold it up to the painting, you can see 10 feet back. So here we see this painting with much activity, much involvement. These works that are multicolored and yet have a unity in their color and in their composition. We've studied Jackson Pollock, who is the uh, king, so to speak, of the abstract expressionists. And what he tried to do in his works he wanted to create activity. He wanted to show action. So he used to put his canvases on the ground and he would drip and he would run and he would throw things at it. And in order to really get a chance to see and appreciate a Pollock, you have to step back. Look at the size of this one. And it's something to see. You can get very involved in it. Another artist, this is just a presentation of a model of a building, but what a fantastic model. And on the left, we see the works of Robert Motherwell. I had an art teacher in Arts High School who took a course with Robert Motherwell. And in front with the square piece here, that's by Mark Rothko. And what Rothko wanted you to do is kind of imagine what was going on behind those blobs of red and yellow. And then they always say a painting's not to be looked at up close. But here's one that is so long that to step back or to come forward, you get a multi-dimensional experience. So it's a little different from a Pollock. Here's another one in which you get involved with what's going on, movement, sparkles, winking at you in activity. And of course, we have Jackson Pollock. There are earthworks, rocks, and uh, large mural paintings, paintings that don't have a traditional rectangular shape, circular pieces. And then we go to one of the great museums of the country, and that is the Guggenheim Museum. And it has, like the Roman Pantheon, has an oculus. And it was designed by an artist by the name of Frank Lloyd Wright. He's an architect who he said he hated modern art, but he certainly was a genius when it came to architecture. So he had a big fight, but just before he died, about 4 months after he died, they opened the Guggenheim Museum. And what a different type of museum it is. It's the Solomon Guggenheim Museum of Contemporary Art. Many call it non-objective art, and it's located right on Fifth Avenue. And as we go to the Metropolitan every time, we always go by this beautiful museum. But you have to go with your friend and discover the uniqueness of this museum. First of all, you take an elevator to the top, and you don't just walk from the bottom up, you walk from the top down. And you come down in a spiral. And in doing so, you never miss any painting. Every work you are able to see. If you go to the Metropolitan, sometimes you can get lost inside there. But look at this. You go up to that top level and then work your way down in a spiral till you get down to the first floor where they have a bookstore and they have an exciting restaurant. So visit the Guggenheim Museum on Fifth Avenue. They just built this tower here in addition to it because it was becoming so enlarged with unique works. Frank Lloyd Wright wanted to make a statement against the so-called rectangle. So he made this statement, creating a building that looks like a piece of sculpture, but having a very practical value to it. You start at the top, and then you work your way around, looking at all of the works in a spiral. Now, New York Guggenheim Museum is not the only one. I just wanted to show you this one. This one is located, this is the Guggenheim Museum in Spain. They have in other countries. There are about 5 Guggenheim museums. But the one that is most famous is the one designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and it's on Fifth Avenue in New York. You can just go over, take a cab up there, and then take a cab back to the train station. But what an exciting experience that is, all by itself. The Guggenheim Museum. Then you can go up to Harlem and you can see another unique museum. It's called the Studio Museum of Harlem. They focus in on African American works and Latino works, but prior to the 50s and 60s and even 70s, African American artists didn't have too many places to exhibit or where they could exhibit their works. But places like the Newark Museum and the Studio Museum, and particularly the Studio Museum, gave them a chance. In Harlem, there was a group in the 30s called the Shaman uh, Foundation, Harmon Foundation, excuse me, and they sponsored African American artists, but very few had a chance to exhibit in the Museum of Modern Art or the Whitney until just recently. But today, if you go up to Harlem on 125th Street, you will visit the Studio Museum of Harlem. And all kinds of works they are placed, sculptural works, works relating to African American life. We see portraits, we see works that look like optical art, and it's right across from the State Building. So while on the outside it does not appear to be a kind of fabulous museum that MoMA is inside, uh, you can have a thrill looking at heroes and looking at Black African culture, African American culture here in and around New York. Look at this mask. I wish I had that, even though it's very large, but it was a piece of cast work, metal. And then we have works by some of the famous African American artists. We talked about Roman Bearden, who worked with collage before, but look at Jacob Lawrence's work. What an abstractionist focusing in on entertainment and jazz, and you can almost feel the notes. Another place around New York that I invite you to visit, of course, is the Jacob Javits Convention Center. They have all kinds of exhibits all year. They have the computer show, they have the boat show, they have the art expo, they have the interior design show, they have the car show, which is very famous, and you can see every model, every kind of car that you want, and if you visit the Jacob Javits Center. So here's an example of the car show, just walking, thousands of people walking through this convention center. Here we see a merchandise show, thousands of companies coming together and presenting their work on a red carpet all the way through. Look at this. Oh, it must be a mile down there with nothing but exhibits. And then you can come in from New Jersey. There's a ferry because it's right on the Hudson River. But once a year, up at the pier, now this time they went up to the New York City Pier 94. We have what is called the Art Expo. Wow, what an exciting event that is. When I go over, I always take my sneakers because I'm telling you, you do a lot of walking. Look at all the artwork that you see here. It goes for blocks. And what happens is that artists from all over the world submit their work, and many corporations sponsor the framing and the shipping of their work into New York. You see so many artists often wait to the last day because you can get so much free or you can get it so much cheaper. But keep in mind, in April 23rd to 26th of 2015 will be the Art Expo at Pier 94. And all you do is walk up and down looking at artworks from all around the world. I invite you to visit Rockefeller Center, Rockefeller Plaza, place where you can go ice skating in the middle of the summer. And of course, over across the street here, we see the studios of the NBC studios. And then around the corner is Radio City Music Hall. But this is the Rockefeller Center ice skating rink. We have NBC, all of the broadcasting companies around. And we have the Christmas lighting once a year. They get this large tree and it is lit up. We cannot forget our own home ground, the Newark Museum. Once the Newark Museum was only this one in the middle here. They had a mansion that was a landmark, and that mansion belonged to a man who was in the beer business, Ballantyne, and that was his home. But then the Newark Museum purchased these buildings here and has become a place to be proud, a place to see all kinds of artwork. Look at this cast piece of Abraham Lincoln. And you can walk up and enjoy artwork that's created by local artists as well as national artists. You can see folk art relating to the African American experience. There's a banquet hall inside. There are works of art that are not, in other words, they're one of a kind, created in different parts of the world. And then we have portraits that we can study. It's Michael Jackson on the right. But that's a very large painting, and you need to see it for yourself. We have Greek works here, sitting on top of a fluted column section. Then you should really go up to West Orange and to see the Thomas Edison Laboratory and also the historical park. Why? Because Thomas Edison was a great inventor. And of course, you see his work or his tools. This is the phonograph, which we would call a record player, which later evolved into all kinds of things. But this was his laboratory. He failed over 5,000 times when he was trying to create the light bulb. And I've coined saying to all my students, and I say it to you, the first time you fail is the last time that you try. So Edison never gave up, and finally he came up with a light bulb, that light bulb. I was in Cairo, Egypt, and I saw a street lit up, and I said that happened because Thomas Edison, who's right near where I live, near where I live, came up with the light bulb. A big thing that we do when we travel each semester and take students to the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. It is the fourth largest church in the world. It has a rose window, which you see here, and these doorways we call portals. And the cathedral goes all the way back. It has a round apse in the back, and they still are working on it. They're working on the steeple. But this is the nave, the main aisle of the cathedral. It is on, and I heard this afternoon on the radio, it's on a list of landmarks. And they even talking about taking it off of the landmark because it costs so much money to operate. Who could destroy or neglect a great piece of architecture like this? All of the piers that you see, these heavy, heavy columns here, are called piers. And this is walking down the nave. And we see it's a Gothic cathedral because all of the arches end up in a point. And we see high relief sculptured portals. The doorway is magnificent. Before you even walk into the cathedral, you are fascinated by this relief sculpture. And you walk forward toward what we call the high altar, and then you see the main altar, and so many exciting stained glass windows, one of which we call a rose window. So it sits on Amsterdam Avenue, and buses come from all over, but the pointed arch means that it is a Gothic cathedral. Now, if you get a diagram of St. John Divine, you see it's in the fashion of what we call a Greek cross. We have the narthex, we have the nave, we have the transepts, we have the choir, and we have the apse, and all these are listed here, narthex, nave, see, and they're numbered. And this is very important for students to know. Stained glass windows, these people are dying out. The people who make them are becoming so scarce. They're an endangered species. It used to be a time where the man's father was a master. He wanted to become an apprentice under his father and take over the business. Today in Europe and around this country, people don't do that. They branch out on their own. So there's a real dearth of people who know how to work with stained glass windows. Now, I give you a copy of this, and I want you to have it in your folder, but it's the Gothic cathedral layout. We call it the Greek cross. So the doorway is called the portal. Then we walk into what some call a vestibule, but that's the narthex. Then we start down the main aisle, which we call the nave. These circles represent piers, these giant piers. Then we get to the main altar, which represents where Christ's heart would be. His head would be here. So we have a main altar and a high altar. We have the transepts, which represent, where the nails were driven into his hands. And then, of course, we go to the high altar, but we see the choir, and the choir faces each other. And then you can walk around the high altar, and that's what we call the apse. So I advise you to look and know these component parts of a Greek cross cathedral. So this is the nave, and then you go a little closer. This is the portal, all the things that I pointed out. This is the choir, and notice you're in the choir, and you're looking back at the nave. Look at this nave. And then this is the rose window of the Cathedral of St. John Divine. The portals are called doorways, or the doorways are called portals. And we stand here and look at this intricate work that has been done on the stained glass windows. Now, the stained glass windows weaken the walls, the sides of the walls. So they have to be reinforced by some means. And what we call these are buttresses. They help reinforce the walls. These giant piers have to hold the weight. And look at all the people in the Cathedral of St. John of Divine. And here's the rose window in the back. And we're looking toward the back. But look at the nave. It's just filled with people. Stained glass windows tell stories. And, of course, if it's Tiffany glass, it is so valuable that no one wants to be detrimental to it. As you walk around the nave or the apse, you see several chapels, and sometimes there are masses going on in these small chapels. Another museum off of Central Park West is the Museum of African Art. And there you will see works dedicated to African art. Here's a piece from Nigeria. And if you notice the lines, we call them scarification marks. And they are marks of great distinction in Nigeria. The Oba is the king. And what they do is they scratch the face and then they, almost with a steel comb, and then the cuts they fill in with dirt so it makes a mark. And the person comes up with all these lines on their face, which we call scarification marks. That's etching and burning and branding and scratching. In this case, they scratch the design, and this is happening and has happened in Nigeria. Now, the breasts and the navel. See, a lot of people don't understand the significance of why these African works accentuate the breasts and the navel and the head. Now, the head is larger than the body, but the Africans believed that the head was the seat of the intellect and the origin of knowledge. The breasts represent life-giving after birth, subsequent to birth. The navel, as it's accentuated here and dramatized, is significant because it's life-giving prior to birth. So when you look at African works and you look at the accentuated breasts and sexual organs and navel and the head enlarged, it's important for you to understand why it is so. The Oba was the king, and at one time he had absolute authority over his subjects. If he fell off a horse or became sick, but if he fell off a horse, that's why he has his warriors there, they believed that if he was injured, the whole tribe would be injured. And he used to cover his mouth. He wasn't supposed to eat. But here we see in cast bronze, the Oba of Benin. Now, African sculpture influenced modern artists like Pablo Picasso. Here are 4 works by Pablo Picasso. Now look over at the African sculpture. Look at the mask on the extreme left here, and you can see that Picasso and George Braque and many of the artists of that period of time, they recognize that there's more power in simplicity. Take away the detail and just give us the line for a nose or a line for an eye or a line for an eyebrow, and you make it more powerful because you've simplified it. So in this case, African art has influenced modern art in Europe and the United States. And so when you go back to the Metropolitan African Art Gallery, we see works that come from Nigeria and come from Benin and come from Ghana and many parts of West Africa. And we will see something we call the fetish. Now, the fetish was housed by the witch doctor, and he would, if someone, let's say, their wallet was stolen, well, the witch doctor would place a nail into the fetish, and if someone from the group came down sick, they actually believed that that was the person who stole the wallet. So we call this a fetish. And there are the accentuated breasts again, but here we see 2 or 3 works where the breasts are accentuated, and in this case, this woman's holding her breasts almost in a sense of pride that I have these badges that help to perpetuate the life of my tribe. You see, the infant mortality rate is so high that when a woman can contribute to the fertility and continuation and the health of a tribe, then she becomes a very valuable and appreciated person. So therefore, those breasts are accentuated as badges of fertility. And this is very important for us to remember when we're studying African art. This is one of the most unique pieces. It's rather small, carved out of ivory and iron and copper, and for many years was owned by Nelson Rockefeller, who contributed this piece to the Metropolitan Museum. Look at the intricacy of the carving. And this is the Queen Mother, who was considered a very important person because she birthed the king. This is in Benin, Nigeria. Old people were given a great high respect. The Queen Mother was given a high respect. And so abstract art was really influenced a lot by African art. Look at the simplicity and power of these African works. Then you should visit and sometimes maybe take a train ride, go down to Washington, D.C., and it looks like a Greek city. It looks like a Roman city. There's the dome, here's the obelisk, and that's the Washington Monument. We have the Lincoln Memorial here. It looks like a Greek temple. Why did they do that? Because it's a working democracy. So we wanted to imitate a working democracy. So we have the House and the Senate, and we have the dome given to us by the Romans. This is the Jefferson Memorial, and it looks much like the Pantheon. It has a Greek portico, it has a dome in the rotunda, and then standing in the rotunda is Thomas Jefferson, who contributed so much. John Meachin wrote a book about Jefferson that everyone should read. So the Lincoln Memorial looks very much like a Greek temple. And the Supreme Court building looks almost exactly like a Greek temple. You have your frieze and you have the relief sculpture in the pediment here, and then you have your Corinthian columns, and they have lines, and those lines are what we call flutes, and water fountains all around it. This is the Supreme Court building of the United States of America. And even the White House has its dome, has its balcony, its circular Roman influence. It has Ionic columns in the back, and in the front has a pediment, and it has Ionic columns. The Jefferson Memorial is a complete imitation of the Pantheon. So when you look at Washington, D.C., you see a Greek or Roman city. You can compare it with all the arches that you see. And then, if you have time, I want you to go out to Mount Rushmore and understand this sculptural piece that was carved right out of the mountain. George Washington to the left. Second was Thomas Jefferson. Third, Theodore Roosevelt, who did much to preserve and conserve the country. And last, Abraham Lincoln. We invite you to visit museums and places around New York. We aren't able to take you everywhere, but what an adventure. Some of us are less than 30 miles away. Let's take that opportunity to visit one of the greatest cultural centers in all the world, New York City.